Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'd like to introduce Dr. Daniel Stone, and we'll talk more about the Spalding-Rigdon conspiracy theory in the Book of Mormon. Daniel Stone is the biographer of William Bickerton, a forgotten Latter-day Prophet who believed that Joseph Smith restored the church. So this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I think many of you probably haven't heard of William Bickerton, and so I'll have Daniel introduce more about that in just a moment. I'd also like to remind everybody to go out and look at our latest transcripts. We've got the latest one with Steve Mayfield here. So please check that out. If you're a monthly subscriber, I've sent that out already. And if you would like to get a print copy, just subscribe. We've lost a few subscribers lately, and I'd just like to remind everybody, if you'd please support us here at Gospel Tangents, we can continue to do this. I've actually just started another job. Haven't quit any, but I've started a new one just to kind of make ends meet. So anyway, I'd love to do this full time, and if you guys can help me out, I'd really appreciate that. Now back to our conversation. All right, well, welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm really excited to be with a brand new author. How about you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Daniel Stone, and I'm the author of William Bickerton, Forgotten Latter-day Prophet. I'm a PhD candidate studying American religious history at Manchester Metropolitan University in England. And yes, I am a Bickertonite.
So that brings up a couple of questions right off the bat. So we're not in England.
Yeah. No, we're not.
we're here in Utah.
We're in Utah.
And you don't actually go to, I mean, I know your school is in England.
Yeah.
But so talk about how that works.
Sure. What ended up happening was I got my master's in American history at Florida Atlantic University. And I got my BA at the University of Florida, so go Gators.
Go Gators. Now, I'll just point out here, I don't know if you know Dr. Mark Staker. He works at the Church History Library. He's a Gator as
Is
well.
he really?
So there's a couple of
I need to meet him.
Yeah.
A fellow Gator. That's great.
Yeah.
In Utah.
That's right.
There's probably a few of us. Only a few of us here.
That's right. So anyway, so Florida Gators. We talked yesterday. You're a big Urban Meyer fan.
Yes.
And Billy Donovan.
Yeah, Billy Donovan, to my family's horror, because now I live in Michigan, and now they're all Michigan fans. So Urban Meyer's now the coach of Ohio. So
Ohio
a big
State,
rivalry.
Yeah, it's a big rivalry.
I love Urban Meyer. My funny story. So the reason I like him was because I was a lowly freshman going to summer school there, taking a couple classes, and I was walking down the road and I saw him jogging towards me. And he kind of just did one of those like head nods, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Urban Meyer said hi to me." So after that, I've been a huge fan.
And I'm kind of have mixed feelings about Urban because he used to coach here at Utah, and then he left for Florida.
Yeah.
And disappointed all the Utah fans, but he did a great job. He was a great coach.
Yeah. 2 national championships when I was there. So
and we should have won one while he was here. It was not fair.
Yeah. Well, you guys didn't have Tim Tebow.
Well, we had our quarterback's still in the NFL, Alex Smith.
Oh, okay.
So Alex was a better quarterback than Tim in the pros. So. But anyway, people aren't here to talk about sports, although I could do that all day long, I think. So you went to Florida, then Florida Atlantic.
Yep.
I actually did see them play. I worked for ESPN, and they played Michigan State.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
They played at Ford Field, I think.
It was at Ford Field. I was at that game.
Awesome.
Yeah,
it's a great school. They're getting better and better with their sports teams. It was a great part of the history department. It's really top notch. I had some awesome professors. They really taught me quite a bit on how to be a good historian. At least I hope I'm a good historian.
Yeah, it's been a great book so far.
Thanks.
So. But then tell us about Manchester, England.
Yeah.
So how do you get into that?
What ended up happening was after I graduated with my master's, I started writing the book, and I ended up finishing the book, and I wanted to go on for my PhD, and I kind of had this this dilemma personally, because I thought, should I write the book first and then go for my doctorate, or should I get my doctorate and then write the book? Because usually the traditional path is to get the doctorate and write the book, but no one had ever written about William Bickerton. He's literally. It's so rare to find in American religion a rock that has never been unturned, and that's William Bickerton. It's unbelievable, because now he started the 3rd largest Latter-day Saint church in the world. It's called the Church of Jesus Christ. It's in 23 countries. There's about 23,000 members, and very few people have ever written about him, and there's never been one biography on him. So I thought to myself, you know what? Let me try to write the book. I felt like I had a good enough grounding to do that, and then with the hopes of, putting it out there and then maybe going for my doctorate. Because my fear was to get on a doctoral committee. And I've heard horror stories sometimes where you don't like certain people on your doctoral committee and they make you put things in your dissertation that you don't really want to do. So I didn't want to have to backtrack. So I thought, let me try to write a scholarly book. Thankfully, Signature Books picked it up. They found it. I was only halfway through and they heard about it and they basically said, well, let's see the book when it's done. And thankfully, there was no major corrections. They just passed it open hand and it was peer reviewed, so it was great.
Oh, nice.
So then what ended up happening is I applied to grad school and I wanted to find a good advisor, and I like to focus on Mormonism, but I like to focus on millennialism too within the American context. And there's a guy in Manchester Metropolitan named Andrew Crome who specifically focuses on millennialism, and he also does mostly English millennialism, but he focuses with a little bit within America too. I told him about what I was interested in, told him about Bickerton. I let him read the manuscript, and long story short, they said this can be part of your dissertation. So it cut my time in half.
Nice.
So I don't have to live in England. I can basically do most of my research in the States, and I just have to fly over there occasionally. And I finished my dissertation, and I'm defending in September of 2018.
Wow.
So
that's really awesome.
Yeah, sorry, it's kind of a long story, but it's a fun story. I like to tell it because I went the untraditional route, but it ended up working out for me.
Well, and I know Russell Stevenson kind of did something similar. I don't know if you know Russell. But he did the book on Elijah Abel.
Yep.
And he's still working on his PhD, but he's already he's written 2 books.
Yeah, for the cause of righteousness.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and he was a fun interview too. So
great. He's a great scholar.
Yeah, he does a great job. So there's a few of you that write books as master's students. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I took a card from Russell for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, great. Have you met Russell? Do you know him then?
Yeah, I've met him a couple times. Fairly briefly, we've talked, but he's a great guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I used to teach at Salt Lake Community College with Russell. We
okay.
At the same time,
neat.
So, yeah, he's a good guy. So, William Bickerton, the forgotten prophet, kind of give us an introduction to him. How did he get involved in Mormonism in the first place, and that sort of a thing?
Okay, well, that's a great question. So, William Bickerton gets into Mormonism under Sidney Rigdon. Even though William Bickerton starts the 3rd largest Latter-day Saint church, what makes him so unique is that he never knew Joseph Smith. He was never part of the early church. While most of the other schismatic groups at least knew Joseph Smith or were a part of it, William Bickerton never was. So he's an English immigrant. He comes to the United States in 1831. He ends up moving. He gets into New York City. He eventually moves to West Virginia, or it was Virginia back then in Wheeling, or it was Virginia back then in Wheeling, but now it's West Virginia. And
so it split during the Civil War,
Yep,
right?
It split during the Civil War, exactly. So that's all kind of told in the book as well. And what ends up happening is he eventually moves to Pittsburgh around 1844. He's a coal miner. He's uneducated, and he's really just kind of looking for prospects where, in Pittsburgh at this time was booming. It was considered the Birmingham of America. It was really like smoggy and smoky, but that kind of advertised the city's success. So he was recently married, recently had a child, and he's just looking for a better life. So around 1844, he moves to Pittsburgh. Well, we know what happens in 1844. That's when Joseph Smith is murdered, brutally in Carthage jail. So and what ends up happening with Sidney Rigdon, for most people kind of know the story, but when Joseph Smith was running for the presidency, Sidney Rigdon was his vice presidential running mate. And Sidney Rigdon was originally from Western Pennsylvania. So Sidney Rigdon, before Joseph Smith is killed, actually goes back to Pittsburgh to basically fulfill one of the prophecies of Joseph Smith, because Joseph had a prophecy that sooner or later my servant Sidney will go back to Pittsburgh. And then he also was, it looks good politically. It's not necessarily a law, but it looks good politically when you have 2 candidates that are running on the same ticket from different states. So that's why Sidney is going to Pittsburgh as well, because it looks good as a vice presidential running mate to have residency in Pennsylvania while Joseph is in Illinois.
Yeah, and Sidney was in the first presidency at the time,
yep,
right?
He was the first counselor.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is when Joseph Smith is murdered, Sidney Rigdon hears about the death from Jedediah Grant was carrying a Nauvoo neighbor days later, and he runs back to Nauvoo, long story short, has this, that climactic debate with Brigham Young. He loses, and he basically runs back to Pittsburgh. While all of this is going on, this is when William Bickerton is moving to Pittsburgh. So the newspapers are talking all about it in Pittsburgh, especially with Sidney Rigdon, because he's kind of like, the hot person of the Latter-day Saint movement that's there, and they really think that he's going to become the leader of the church. There's one newspaper article that basically says he's going to become their patriarch or their leader, and then they actually have to issue a correction when he doesn't become it. So it's hot news. So William Bickerton obviously would have read those reports.
So was Sidney pretty famous then because he was the vice presidential candidate? Because I've always wondered how widespread or how much notoriety Joseph got when he ran for president. Because I even know a lot of people, I will say, hey, did you know Joseph ran for president? And they're like, what?
Yeah.
So even a lot of Mormons don't necessarily know that.
Yeah, it wasn't so much that he was the vice presidential running mate, even though that did bring some news. It was mostly because he was associated with the Book of Mormon, and there was that Spalding theory that where basically they thought that Sidney Rigdon helped Joseph Smith plagiarize or forge the Book of Mormon. Basically, a lot of people thought Sidney Rigdon had written it because he was well educated, Joseph wasn't. So there's this whole theory that Joseph knew Sidney Rigdon like early on, and then they pretend that they meet first the first time in Ohio, but that's not really the case. So what's happening in the newspapers is one of the articles talks about how, Sidney Rigdon's come back to Pittsburgh to prove that he never helped Joseph Smith write the Book of Mormon. So,
really? So was the Spalding theory pretty big back then?
Oh yeah, very much so.
Oh wow.
That's really what made Sidney Rigdon have greater notoriety within Pittsburgh. And he was also known as a great orator. So, and the Mormons were hot news. They were the eccentric religious group in the United States at that time. So
that's interesting. I would love to talk a little bit about the Spalding theory. That's actually something I've wanted to talk about, and so can you just give us a little bit of background? What is the Spalding theory?
So I'm not an expert on it, but I can give you the gist of it. There was a guy, I forget his first name, but basically, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Solomon Spalding.
Solomon Spalding, thank you. He originally was, I believe, they're from Ohio or Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh area.
Yeah, I think it was Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and so they're somehow trying to connect Sidney Rigdon to Solomon Spalding because they're from the same area, and people just thought it was more than a coincidence that Sidney Rigdon all of a sudden meets Joseph Smith in Ohio when he's a Campbellite minister, and that just so happens to believe in the gathering of Israel and communal living, very similar. So they're like, oh no, Sidney Rigdon helped write it, because according to a lot of the theories, before they ended up finding the Solomon Spalding manuscript, decades later, I think it was in the 20th century they found it. A lot of people were saying, I remember Solomon Spalding, the manuscript. He wrote this novel, and it talks about people coming from, from like Israel or from the Middle East to come over to the United States. I remember names like Lehi and Nephi. You have all these people saying, I remember these words that are in the Book of Mormon. Well, we find out later that that's not really the case. Solomon Spalding wrote this book. I believe it's about Romans that get knocked off course and eventually land in the New World. So it's kind of similar, but not really. And Sidney Rigdon had nothing to do with the Spalding manuscript. So but back then, people really thought that was the case.
Okay, so this happened because I know, if my memory is correct, I believe Sidney Rigdon, so the church was organized April 6, 1830, and I think Sidney joined it around December or January of, December 1830, January 1831, or somewhere around there. So he technically wasn't one of the first members.
No, he wasn't.
But I believe he came to Ohio, it was January, February, and he met Joseph Smith and then immediately got baptized. So do you know approximately when these rumors started about Sidney writing the Book of Mormon?
No, I'm not too sure when the Solomon Spalding theory comes about. I'd have to double check and look at that.
I'll have to check out Fawn Brody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot more studies that's happened with Solomon Spalding too. So it's a lot of great stuff has been written about it. But I'd have to double check and make sure, because that's not my cup of tea.
So it was early on in the 1830s. Would it be safe to say it was that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was very early on, because people were trying to figure out how on earth did this country bumpkin write this huge book. I mean, the Book of Mormon was over 400 pages, had all these different names and different literary themes, and they're just like, there's no way this guy could have written that.
Now, have you actually, because I think they call it manuscript found,
Oh, yeah.
Have you actually read it?
I've read bits and pieces of it, yeah.
Because I've read it, and it feels hilarious to me because it's so poorly written.
Probably why it was never published.
I think the main character is a guy by the name of Fabius, and he gets blown off course, and they talk about it's very, like, they talk about the Delawanics, or like Delaware, like, it's a really Indian-sounding names, and the Kentucks, I think, like Kentucky.
Oh, really?
And so it sounds very like Native American, where honestly, except for the finding of the supposed finding, there are some similarities because, in fact, Solomon Spalding says that he went into this cave and he dug it up under a rock. And so it sounds a lot like what Joseph Smith said when he found the gold plates. But that's like the only similarity. If you actually read the book, like, there's so many spelling errors. It's terribly written. And I was laughing. Like, it's so poorly written.
That's funny.
But yeah, to me, I was just like, I don't know how anybody can say, oh yeah, this was definitely the formation of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, and of all places, they found it in Hawaii, didn't they? And
yeah, and I'm trying to figure out how it got to Hawaii.
Yeah, and now I think it's at Oberlin College.
Oberlin College, yeah. So you can actually download it, and I did, and I read it, and it's pretty. I think it's funny. Like, it's so poorly written, it's funny. But anyway, so 1844, Joseph Smith dies, and people are still trying to tie Sidney Rigdon back to Solomon Spalding, and all
exactly.
That. So that's very interesting. I didn't realize that background. I hope you enjoyed listening to Dr. Daniel Stone. I just wanted to mention one other really cool thing about him. So today he posted on Facebook that he passed his doctoral dissertation. So he's an official doctor now. Anyway, I knew it was just a formality, but congratulations, Daniel. That's awesome. In our next conversation, we're going to talk a little bit more about Brigham Young. Did William Bickerton run across Brigham Young?
So William Bickerton is a devout LDS Mormon, and when you read the minutes, it's quite interesting. I mean, in one of the meetings that they have, he actually leads the vote to sustain Brigham Young and the 12 in their offices. It's kind of a ceremonial thing because obviously they don't have power, but he's showing their support for them, and he's a member of the LDS Church for 10 months.
I hope you enjoyed that short clip from our next interview. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please go to our patreon.com/gospeltangents and subscribe for just $5 a month. If you'd like a transcript of this, please click the yellow subscribe button at gospeltangents.com, and I'll send you this and all future transcripts. Also, if you'd like a paperback like we've got here, those are available at our website at amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents. Please get all updates at our Facebook page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. We're also on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. You can also get transcripts individually at our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. Finally, make sure that you subscribe on our Apple Podcast page. Just do a quick search for Gospel Tangents there and give us a 5-star review while you're at it. Thanks again for listening. Your support helps create more Mormon history classes and podcasts such as this, and so I really appreciate you listening. Please share with your friends. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some more of our great videos. Thanks again.